a man stand on the stage and tell his testimony of his healing. I looked out in the audience. There wasn't a person in the audience that was thinking about anything else. They were witnessing truth right before their eyes, a miracle. Now, you see that and you look at the person, it doesn't look like a movie star, doesn't look like a vegetarian, doesn't look like they're buffed, doesn't look like they're different than anybody else. They just look like an average person. And the most common thought that happens when you witness that is, if that person can do it, so could I. And that drops the belief right away. You cannot go back to being the same person after you witness that. It's impossible. You're witnessing that type of transformation. And stroke patients that have had a paralyzed limb for years or been blinded by a stroke, that have perfect vision again. And the scans from their physician shows a complete 100% recovery. Now, strokes don't heal if they don't heal in 2 weeks, according to the conventional model of medicine. And nerves don't really come back online if they've been damaged after a period of time. And yet we're witnessing those kind of supernatural changes. So then the belief, the subconscious belief that that is impossible. You may say, oh yeah, I believe that a person can be healed. Yeah, I believe in miracles. But when it comes time to actually execute them, you got to step outside a little bit and you got to trust a whole lot. So then when you start witnessing it, it becomes like a brush fire. I mean, we see in our events, once we start seeing those healings, we know it's going to just get better and more phenomenological. And then the side effect of that is a person with Raynaud's syndrome who has incredible sensitivity to cold, that has an immune problem, that is, you can't go out of their house. They stand on the stage and they say, I cannot believe it. I was just outside. It's November in London. I have no pain in my hands. And someone in the audience watches the same thing. We had 4 people at that event with Raynaud's syndrome go into complete recovery, into complete remission. So just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, all of a sudden health and wellness can be as infectious as disease. And wow, and all of a sudden it's the new consciousness, it's the new way. It's so we don't have to rely on something outside of us to make us feel better inside of us. We begin to figure that out.
And I think that's, that was when I read You Were the Placebo, that was that ultimately compelling case to remind us that, hey, this is something that every clinical trial accounts for. It accounts for the mind affecting the body. So anybody who's a skeptic, you can't be a skeptic. And you list, hundreds in that book alone, right? But then just knowing that we account for that in every single randomized clinical trial that we do, we account for the placebo effect affecting the body in a positive way. So we know that this happens, but that nonetheless, when something spectacular happens with the placebo effect, spontaneous remission, we'll discard that as like, that was random. Yeah. Even though we know that the placebo effect is real, or the nocebo effect, the opposite of that, is also real, still science wants to kind of like, let's just discard these spontaneous remissions.
Well, I'm actually more interested in deepening that understanding, which means, do we need a sugar pill, saline injection, or some false surgery or procedure to change our state of being? Do you need some external influence? Because the sugar pill is a symbol. It's a symbol of possibility, and the person has been conditioned that pills heal people. So they put their power into it, and the moment the physician says, this is a new drug, and the physician is enthusiastic or excited about it, that enthusiasm becomes contagious. And the person all of a sudden sees the possibility in their mind. They actually see a future, that they actually could be healthy or better. That's a clear intention. And when they feel optimistic, when they feel inspired, when they feel grateful, when they're changing their emotions or energy, they're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And if thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain and feelings are the vocabulary of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, they just moved from their past present state of being into a future present state of being. They began to change their brain and body by thought alone. So then, do you need that sugar pill, or can you just do it without it and get so good at doing it that you can change your state of being without the belief that you need to rely on something
How
outside of you.
fucking radically empowering, though, right?
No,
like
it
to
is.
take control of that mechanism and also this is the time that it needs to happen, because the general skepticism of the medical industry and of the pills actually working and of the conventional treatments actually working, that's on a downward decline. I would say on the macro, people are trusting that, oh, I can just take a pill and everything will be fixed. People are trusting that less. So as they trust that less, their actual belief that that is going to happen is going to decrease. So the result of that happening is going to decrease. So we need something else to replace that, which is the methodologies that you're really teaching.
Now, there's a caveat to this because in depression studies where they give someone a placebo and they say this is the best drug for depression, 4 out of 5 people that are in the placebo study get better or do as well as people who are taking the actual antidepressant. That's 80%, right? But here's the deal. They've been taking that sugar pill for about 8 weeks. Every day, taking that pill and combining that clear intention with an elevated emotion, they're moving into a new state of being. So now what that means is you got to do the work. That means you actually have to practice sitting down, getting beyond all the people in your life, all the things you need to do, the place you need to. You got to get beyond your body wanting to get up and go because it's been programmed that way, and you got to tell your body, you're not getting up until I say. Now, this is when you come out of the bleachers and you get on the playing field, because now you have to go from the known self, disentangle from those programs, and exist in the unknown and possibilities. So then the person who's combining the clear intention with an elevated emotion and not relying on some external or exogenous substance, they're doing it by thought alone, changing their state of being, I guarantee you it's going to begin to become a habit. And they're going to know when they're there and when they're not. And the word meditation means to become familiar with. So then the more you become familiar with how you feel in changing that state of being, the easier it will be for you to do it with your eyes open as well as your eyes closed. And if you go back to the old state of being, there's a good probability that your pain or your condition will come back. So there's this kind of waltz that goes on when people are learning how to heal and change. They take a few steps forward and then a few steps back, and then 3 steps forward and only 1 step back. And they got to practice self-regulating. They got to practice what they're paying attention to, what they're unconscious of. And if you stay with it for a long enough period of time, all of a sudden now the person reaches a point, we've measured what happens, where their chemistry changes so dramatically that they're literally in love with life. Now, imagine what happens when oxytocin is released in the quantities that we see. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor. And that's a big word or set of words that just means a chemical that signals the arteries in your heart to literally expand. And when they expand, you're getting more blood flow in there. And just like when your sexual organs are aroused and there's blood flow in there, now with the same intensity, you're going to feel it right in your heart, and it's going to be way bigger. And now the person's heart is wide open. So here's the question. The person feels those emotions. Do you think they're going to want to judge somebody else in that moment? You think they're going to want to hold a grudge? They're not going to try to forgive. They're going to feel so amazing. They're not going to want to lose this feeling, and they're just going to say, I forgive you. I'm not going to give this feeling up because of you. Now that's the side effect of true transformation. The side effect is a greater level of consciousness. The side effect is a greater skill set in life. And I think that when you start getting good at this, then all the things you thought you wanted, you no longer want, because when you're creating more brain and heart coherence, you feel more whole. And the more whole you feel, the less you live in lack. So how could you want